Some people don't remember becoming strong. There was no moment, no decision, no ceremony where life tapped them on the shoulder and said, "Now it's your turn to carry the weight." One day, they were just a child, and the next day, they were holding together a world that felt like it was falling apart. They learned early how to stay quiet when things hurt, how to read a room before speaking, how to swallow fear and keep going. And years later, people look at them and say, "You're so strong," without ever realizing that strength was never a choice. It was survival. If you became strong too early, this story may feel uncomfortably familiar. You might have been the child who grew up faster than everyone else, the one who understood adult problems before you understood your own emotions, the one who didn't get to fall apart because someone else already was. And even now, as an adult, you may still feel like resting is dangerous, like vulnerability is a risk, like depending on anyone means giving something up you can't afford to lose. Psychologically, people who become strong too early often come from environments where safety was inconsistent. Not always abusive in obvious ways, but emotionally unpredictable. Homes where love was conditional, where chaos was normal, where responsibility arrived long before readiness. When a child senses that no one else is reliably holding things together, their nervous system adapts. They become alert, observant, responsible, mature beyond their years, not because they want to be impressive, but because being aware feels safer than being innocent. This early strength often looks admirable from the outside. Teachers praise it, family members rely on it, society rewards it. But inside, something quieter happens. The child learns that their needs come last, that emotions must be managed, minimized, or hidden, that being useful is safer than being vulnerable. Over time, this becomes an identity. Not just "I am strong," but "I must be strong." And that belief doesn't disappear when childhood ends. As adults, people who became strong too early often struggle with an invisible exhaustion. They are competent, capable, dependable. They handle crises calmly. They show up when others fall apart. But when the noise fades and they're alone, there's a deep tiredness that sleep doesn't touch, because they've been holding their breath emotionally for years. One of the psychological costs of early strength is emotional suppression. When a child learns that expressing fear, sadness, or need only adds to the burden around them, they learn to contain it, to compartmentalize, to stay functional. And while this skill can be useful in emergencies, it becomes harmful when it becomes permanent. Emotions don't disappear when ignored. They settle into the body. They show up as tension, anxiety, numbness, or an unshakable sense that something is always wrong, even when everything looks fine. Many people who became strong too early feel uncomfortable receiving care. Compliments feel awkward. Help feels suspicious. Depending on others triggers guilt or fear. Somewhere deep inside is the belief that if you let go, everything will collapse. So you keep going. You keep managing. You keep being the one who has it together, even when you don't. Relationships can feel especially complicated. You may attract people who need saving, fixing, or emotional labor. Not because you consciously choose them, but because your nervous system recognizes that role. It feels familiar, safe in a strange way. Being needed feels like purpose, but being cared for feels foreign, even threatening. Intimacy requires softness, and softness once came at a cost. Psychologically, this pattern is often linked to parentification, a process where a child takes on adult emotional or practical responsibilities. The child becomes the listener, the mediator, the caretaker, the problem solver. And while this builds resilience, it also steals something essential: the freedom to be a child, to make mistakes, to feel without managing the impact. As adults, this stolen childhood often shows up as grief we don't know how to name, a sadness for something that never quite existed, a longing for rest that feels undeserved, a question that lingers quietly. When is it my turn to be held? People who became strong too early often have a complicated relationship with vulnerability. They may crave deep connection, but struggle to let anyone see them when they're not okay. They may offer empathy easily but feel uncomfortable receiving it. Their strength becomes both armor and prison. And yet this strength didn't come from nowhere. It came from intelligence, from sensitivity, from awareness. These individuals were not weak children who became strong. They were perceptive children who adapted. They sensed what was needed and became it. But adaptation is not the same as choice. One of the hardest realizations for people who became strong too early is understanding that strength, when unexamined, can become self-abandonment, always pushing forward, always minimizing pain, always being the reliable one. Over time, this can disconnect you from your own emotional truth. You may struggle to identify what you feel or want. You may default to responsibility instead of desire, obligation instead of joy. Healing does not mean rejecting strength. It means redefining it. True strength includes rest, includes asking for help, includes allowing yourself to be human, not just functional. It means learning that you don't have to earn care through usefulness, that you are allowed to exist without holding everything together. Psychologically, this shift requires safety. The nervous system must learn that vulnerability will not lead to collapse, that expressing need does not create danger. This is not something that happens overnight. It happens through small, consistent experiences of being supported, through boundaries, through slowing down, through listening to the body instead of overriding it. For many, this process brings up anger at the unfairness of having to grow up too soon, anger at the adults who couldn't show up, anger at the version of yourself who learned to disappear emotionally. This anger is not a setback, it is a sign of reconnection, a sign that the part of you that was silent is finally speaking. And with that anger often comes grief. Grief for the softness you didn't get to have, the safety you had to create, the version of yourself that learned to survive instead of play. This grief is not weakness, it is truth. People who became strong too early often fear that if they stop being strong, they will lose their worth. But worth was never the reward for endurance. Worth was always inherent. You were valuable, even before you learned how to carry everything alone. And here is the quiet truth that changes everything. You don't have to prove your strength anymore. You already survived. You already adapted. You already carried what was never meant to be yours. Now the work is different. The work is learning how to rest without guilt, how to receive without suspicion, how to soften without fear, how to let someone else hold the weight, even briefly, how to trust that you don't disappear when you stop being strong. This doesn't mean becoming fragile, it means becoming whole. If you became strong too early, let this be a reminder that your resilience was remarkable, but it was also costly. And you are allowed to acknowledge both. You are allowed to honor the strength that saved you and still choose a life that no longer demands constant endurance. You are allowed to be strong and tired, capable and tender, independent and supported. And maybe, just maybe, the deepest strength you will ever learn is this: the courage to finally let yourself be human. Not the human who holds everything together, but the human who is allowed to rest. And in that rest, you may discover that you were never weak for needing it. You were strong for surviving without it, and brave for finally choosing something softer.